Thank you. I'm here because the history department invited me in the spirit of Capstone, in which we have lecturers from disciplines outside the main discipline, history in this case, to weigh in on how we, in our own discipline, would understand the topic at hand. In this case, this is an English teacher's perspective on the 2012 election. And as you know, I am an English teacher here at Canterbury School. Mr. Danenbarger is my name. So, the way I want to approach this is by talking about a certain kind of literary theory called the other. It's a theory and a topic that exists in psychology and in history. It's not confined to English, but certainly because English touches on so many things, it is one that the fictions and the historical poems and such of literature speak of. So the title of this particular talk is The Xmen, Grendel, Caliban, the Kenyan, and the Cultist. That already sounds a bit far-reaching, but we will move forward and see where we stand here. Okay, what is literary otherness? All right, literary theorists refer to certain figures in texts as the other. Sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it? If you were in regular American literature last year, you may have had a unit on the other in which we read Sherman Alexie's novel, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, in which we sort of put that in the context of otherness, and the character there, Junior, was often otherized. He's a figure who is perceived by the group as not belonging, as being different in some fundamental way. Strangers are natural others, right? We don't know who they are. They are not us. It's a stranger. The group sees itself as the norm and judges those who do not meet that norm. They're different in any way. They're the other. This is important. They lack essential characteristics possessed by the group. The other is almost always seen as a lesser or inferior being and is treated accordingly. The other in a society may have few or no legal rights, may be characterized as less intelligent or as immoral, and may also be regarded as subhuman. It's not good being an other. It's not good being otherized. Important distinction here. The other is not an outsider. It's not the same thing as an outsider. They overlap a little bit, but the outsider, by definition, has the ability to rejoin the group. Okay, an other does not. So you've seen in narrative stories, movies you guys have seen, various kinds of after-school specials, what have you. There's an outsider, an outlier, but usually the happy ending of the narrative is that the outsider somehow manages to reintegrate. All right, you guys who took American literature last year remember Hester Prynne. She was certainly on the outside an outcast. She seemed almost to be otherized for a good part of the novel, being treated as entirely sinful, a product of Satan, in league with the devil. But by the end of the novel, she's able to regenerate and restore her standing in the community. She still seems to like to stay on the outside of it, but the town has accepted her back in as one of them. The other does not have that possibility. That's how far outside of the mainstream the other is in literature, all right, and in other arenas as well. The offspring of the other, unlike Hester's little child, right, is unable, the offspring of the other are never able to join the main group, significantly. Okay, some students ask me this, Mr. Danenbarger, what's the first piece of English literature? And the answer that is perhaps most accurate is what was viewed as very much a historical poem titled Beowulf. All right, and Beowulf was the history, really, of the peoples who settled in what is now Great Britain. Some of them came over from the part of Europe that is now Germany. The Angles and the Saxons both came in and moved in, invaded, if you will, into Great Britain. And some Scandinavian groups came down, the Jutes being one, who are actually the real authors of this history. The Beowulf takes place in Scandinavia before anyone else, before they had traveled over to the island. There was a group living on there was a few tribes living on the island of Great Britain at the time. Does anyone know the name of the group that predated these? The Celts. The Celts were all there. And this is a really rough history, and the historians here can probably help me out with it. But they kind of pushed the Celts off of the main island. Where did they push the Celts to? Ireland. and to another degree, Wales. All right? And if you go to Ireland or Wales, they have entirely different languages there that don't bear too much resemblance to English, of the Anglo-Saxon heritage of things. So, in any event, this was a traditional story that had been going handed down orally. Beowulf had been handed down orally for years. Until a writer, after the advent of Christianity, put it to paper. We get finally someone who has the written language skills in this Anglo-Saxon language that had developed over the centuries on the island. When the Anglos and the Saxons and the Jutes all kind of merged, the language developed. They developed a written language. Somebody, okay, who understood Christianity, Christianity had now moved into the island too, put this to paper, this poem, all right, which was really an oral history of the existence of the Scandinavian wing of it before arriving on the island that is Great Britain. What's the story? It's the story of how the great warrior Beowulf saves their Scandinavian ancestors back in Scandinavia from a horrible, dreaded enemy, Grendel. All right, and the majority of the poem takes up that battle. But later, Grendel's mother comes in, and they have to defeat, because Grendel's mother's kind of angry that they killed her son. So Beowulf has to go slay the mom, too. Let's take a quick look at a little bit of the poem. Okay, here's a little clip from Beowulf itself. On the left-hand side, I have the language that it was originally written in. That's English, my friends. Here it is in a modern English translation. This is the language you all speak day to day, but it's in a very early form. Back in the year somewhere between 700 and 1000. It's not to be confused with Middle English, in which the Canterbury Tales were written, or even modern English. Shakespeare writes in modern English, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I've read Shakespeare, it doesn't sound very modern to me. Compared to this, does Shakespeare now seem a little modern? That says that in English. If you ever had to translate English, here it is. I'd even, take a stab at this. I'm sure I'd mispronounce it. E kom of mor under the mistrop in Grendel gog and god is ye bear. That essentially means, in off the moors, down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. Now, Grendel, here's a little bit of a point at which Grendel's coming in to attack the main barracks or castle where King Hrothgar and his Scandinavian tribes are living. It says he scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life before or since did he find harder fortune of the hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead, arriving at the bawn. Down here you have an example of what he's about to do to these people. In fact, he's going to go there and start ripping them limb from limb and eating them. And he does that in the next couple of stanzas. He just starts ripping them up and just chewing on them and eating them. Sounds pretty monstrous, doesn't it? Pretty other-esque. That's how he's depicted in the poem. And yet, doesn't this seem a little bit, in that other underlined part, do you see anything that seems even mildly human about that second underlined section, or even the first part? Is it all monstrous? Are those words the kind of language that you'd use to describe something with no human characteristics? No. Is there anything human in that passage? Yeah.
It says that and his glee. It shows that he does feel some form of emotion.
Yeah. Any other emotions in there besides glee? Spurn. Animals don't feel spurn. Well, actually, my cats occasionally feel a little spurned when I don't feed them. But yes, humans tend to feel spurned. There's little bits of evidence to suggest that this creature might have originally been just a human enemy. That over the years, when you start to demonize your enemies a little bit more, they become more and more creature-like. Here's some other text right from the poem that suggests, as literary theorists now are assuming, is that of the time, back when the Jutes were back in Scandinavia, Grendel was really just a human figure from an enemy tribe that over time became demonized. Some text here that's suggestive of the fact that traces of Grendel's essential humanity have actually been maintained in the poem, even as he's ripping up people and eating them for lunch. Even as he's shredding them, gashing them, and even as he's described as a monster over and over again, he has a deathbed. He's got hair on his head. All right? He's got shoulders and sinew like a human creature. So otherizing, even in these kinds of earliest pieces of literature, is something that is notable and common. Grendel may well have been just a human figure before he was turned into a monster. Grendel had a mommy who loved him. Look, she comes back to avenge her son's death. Right? She draws a dagger. She's got hands and arms and everything. She is, I mean, humans are the only ones that come back and avenge deaths, not animals. So again, we see evidence that perhaps Grendel is human, like the Jutes, like any of us. They made a movie, by the way, of Beowulf back in 2000. Did anyone see the Beowulf movie? Yeah, it's a lot of fighting and slashing, yeah. And I looked around for some images from the Beowulf movie to see like how they would cast Beowulf, and I came across a couple of those, but I was really interested when I came across Grendel, images of Grendel. I was really interested when I came across Grendel's mother. Oh, well, let me just, actually, before I get to Grendel's mother, a couple more things about how Grendel's human. Subject to the law. People in the Jute community expect Grendel, after he's killed their relatives, to pay the weir gold. If you kill someone in these cultures, you have to pay some money to the family of the deceased. Animals don't have to be subject to human law. It happens in the poem. Grendel may have been human. How about his mother in the movie? They chose to cast Angela Jolie as Grendel's mother. All right, she's pretty human. I had to clip the picture too because for those of you who've seen the movie, it's somewhat. She's not wearing anything. She's got like body paint on or some kind of sci-fi. I mean, really, you can see here the movie makers now are playing around. They're trying to sell some tickets, but you get the picture here that they felt that they could get away with having Grendel's mother be Angela Jolie. If that's the case, then they're taking a little bit of artistic license, but I would argue that on some level or another, they're not taking that much license. I have not seen the movie. Other famous literary others. You guys read, was The Tempest something from 2 years ago, I believe it was, that we did? 3, maybe 3. I think you guys are contemporaries of when we did The Tempest. You remember Caliban, the creature? I shouldn't say creature, the being that existed on the island where Prospero, the Duke of Milan, had been exiled. Caliban tells us that he says, "For I am all the subjects that you have, which first was mine own, king, and here you stye me in this hard rock, whilst you do keep me from the rest of the island." It was Caliban's island. It was his until Prospero got there and started to imprison him. Many readers of The Tempest recognize in Shakespeare references to how the Europeans were starting to voyage to faraway lands in Africa, Asia, and such places, and coming back with wild stories of the natives in these places that were so unchristian and bizarre. Didn't speak. They were brutish. And Shakespeare seems to be taking advantage of these stories and making use of them in this figure Caliban. But you can see he's very articulate and has a point here. Wait a minute. I was the king of this island before you got here. But Prospero doesn't seem to see him as totally human, as you may recall from your reading The Tempest. Right? He calls him a bored slave, which any print of goodness wilt not take, being capable of all ill. I pitied thee, took pains to make thee speak, taught thee each hour one thing or another, whence thou didst not, savage, know thine own meaning, but wouldst gabble like a thing most brutish. I endowed thy purposes with words that made them known, but thy vile race, though thou did learn, had that in it which good natures cannot abide to be with. Therefore wast thou deservedly confined into this rock, who hadst deserved more than a prison. Prospero does not depict Caliban as being anything other than a brute, vile, subhuman, in need of language. Caliban later says, yeah, you taught me language, and now I know how to curse my existence with it because of what you've done to me. There's a lot of evidence here that what Shakespeare's trying to do is suggest that Caliban is a regular, normal, human figure who's been demonized, otherized by the European colonizer, the European invader. all right, who is bringing his value system onto this island and looking at the native person and saying, oh, you're a brute. You can't even speak. You're so stupid and subhuman. Just Caliban spoke another language at that time. Other literary others. Cain. I was thinking about starting with Cain. You guys know the story of Cain from the Old Testament? It's like in the first couple of lines. Why is Cain another? What did he do?
He was the first person to kill his brother.
First person to kill somebody, killed his brother. What happened as a result of Cain killing his brother?
He was cursed tenfold.
He was what? Say it again.
He was cursed tenfold by God.
Cursed tenfold by God. And what was the particular punishment that Cain had to suffer? This is an important narrative, perhaps in all of the literature and Western world. What did Cain suffer? He was banished. First of all, he could never farm the land, and he had to leave the unit, the town, the area, and he had to wander without a place. And he was given a mark. The Bible doesn't say what that mark is. That it said, "Don't kill him; he's one of mine," but also made him permanently other. I left Cain out because he did kill his brother, so that was kind of mean and maybe not completely other. Medea from Euripides. Medea also is banished from her town. Her husband wants to move up in the chain, and he has her exiled so he can marry someone more important. And she's so mad that she considers killing her own children to get back at him. In any event, we have Golem from Jewish folklore. The troll, Scandinavian folklore, Frankenstein's creation, the evil stepmother from Grimm, the abominable snowman, all these figures who have human qualities but have been otherized. And some of these are historical, and some of these are literary. They don't all rise to the same level, perhaps, as a Grendel or a Caliban. I should say, too, about Golem, because that word looks so much like the figure from, does that name ring a bell for anyone, Golem? Lord of the Rings. You should know that Beowulf was not even considered an important text or a literary text at all until the 1900s. It was sitting in a vault somewhere, almost burned up and never to be seen again in a bad fire. There was one man who took a look. It was considered just a historical text of a history of the peoples who founded the island. Then one man discovered it and decided this is literature. This is a poem that rises to the level of literature, and was the guy that turned the tide on Beowulf and made it an important object of study in English circles. That man was J.R.R. Tolkien. He was the one who I believe it was before he wrote the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, made Beowulf into a famous poem. So you can see he's already heavily invested in Beowulf. And sure enough, he creates a character who reminds people of a famous other, Golem. Now, Golem, of course, kind of is also the Golem in the movie. I thought about using Golem as another. He's also sort of right. He brings a little of it on himself by worshiping the ring too much, and he's a sort of a cautionary tale, and kind of makes himself into the other a little bit. So he's not a perfect other. Okay. The Xmen. The Xmen. Has anyone seen the Xmen movie? A few of you? I'm going to show you a little bit of it right now. The premise here, of course, is that all human evolution is based on mutation. Well, mutation happens a little bit too quickly in some cases here, and we get these people who have mutated a little bit, and they have superpowers. But if you've watched the movie, or as I have I collected comic books when I was 13 years old, and I had all the X-Men, and you know that one of the central narrative tensions in the X-Men comic book series and the movie series is that they are feared, reviled, because they're human. Yes, you see the movies portraying them as very human. In the clip I'm about to show, you'll see them being portrayed as human, but they have an other quality that makes the dominant group, the regular humans, afraid. We have a classic historical othering here in the beginning of the movie. He's got mutant powers. But ever so human. Now we'll get into the more mundane.
Niagara Falls, up the Canadian Rockies, and then it's only a few hundred miles to Anchorage.
Oh, it'll be kind of cold.
Well, that's the point, stupid. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an adventure.
And when are you going to do this?
I don't know. After high school, before college.
Seems pretty normal, doesn't it?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now seeing the beginnings of another stage of human evolution. These mutations manifest at puberty and are often triggered by periods of heightened emotional stress.
Thank you, Miss Gray. It was quite educational. However, it fails to address the issue that is the focus of this hearing. 3 words. Are mutants dangerous?
I'm afraid that's an unfair question, Senator Kelly. After all, the wrong person behind the wheel of a car can be dangerous.
Well, we do license people to drive.
Yes, but not to live. Senator, it is a fact.
Okay, so
Who've come forward and revealed themselves.
the American government's worried about this now.
Hostility, even violence. It is.
So again, at the heart of the tension, the narrative tension in the X-Men, yeah, they go and they fight evil villains, and there's a lot of action. But part of what makes the success of the core of the X-Men is that they have all these human qualities. They like to kiss girls, and they get caught up in horrible scenes with their parents being taken off in the Holocaust. They're constantly humanized in the movie, but they have this extra element that makes them reviled. In all the series of the movie, they've kept up that theme, and if you've seen the movies, you'll be familiar with it. The government has to get involved. Speaking of the government, the presidential campaign. This is the first presidential campaign in U.S. history where neither candidate was both white and Christian. All right, so both candidates have a quality of being other. So let's take a look at some of the ways. But let's go back a little bit first. There's been some other candidates before who were not both white and Christian. Maybe the history teachers can help me out with this a little bit, but in the 1928 election, I believe, the Democratic candidate was a guy named Alfred Smith. And he was the first candidate who was Catholic, Roman Catholic, who actually got the nomination for one of the major parties. His parents were Irish. They were born in another country. He grew up in decidedly lower middle class existence. He did rise to become the governor. He was anti-prohibition in this period, which probably caused him a little bit of turbulence in the election versus Hoover in 1928. And you can imagine what it meant for a major party to elect a Catholic as their nominee. What happened to Al Smith? He got othered. The way in which he was slandered in the newspapers is that, what's the image here? Why is Smith being slandered? Yeah, go ahead, Will.
He's pandering to the Pope.
Yes, he's in league with the Pope, and the Pope is going to do what?
He's going to take over America.
Pope's going to take over. The Pope is going to tell Al Smith what to do, and the Vatican's going to take over the United States. That was the way in which Smith was smeared back in 28. By the way, he got crushed in a landslide. Is there any other way that Smith was smeared? Is anyone, are there any additional ways I should bring him into it? People, he had a thick New York accent. He was, anti-prohibition, so he was smeared as a drunk, as this person from a little enclave in New York. He was not like the rest of the country. But worst of all, he was taking orders. He was going to take orders from the Pope. And then no Catholic was nominated again to run for president until 1960. We have JFK. JFK, again, the same exact kind of slander. He had to make a speech to the nation about how he wasn't going to take orders from the Pope. He was forced into that speech. He probably wouldn't have had the, if I managed to get some of the beginning and after the speech, the opening of the speech, he says, I think there's more weighty matters for us to discuss today, but I better get on to this. He has to come out and say, because he's being slandered again by various groups, that he is not going to take orders from the Pope. And he defended himself quite eloquently. But people are afraid. People were afraid of that. Now, he went on to win. And you can discuss in history class various reasons why he managed to win. Okay, on to the current election. Obama. He is the first black U.S. president. But that's one thing. That doesn't come up so much. But there is a lot of discussion of him that meets the general public one way or the other, that he is not born in the United States. He's born in Kenya, which means that he is not like us. Now, he was not born in Kenya. He was born in the United States. Presidential candidate Newt Gingrich. You can see him practicing some otherization here. He's so far outside our comprehension that if you only understand Kenyan anti-colonial behavior, you can begin to piece together his actions. This is an accurate prediction of his behavior. He's not like us. He's not American. I'm about to really... Save the day. Thank you. Gingrich isn't a sideshow. He was in the lead. He won a few states in the Republican presidential campaign. Sean Hannity repeating the story, which is true actually. Obama did have a chance to eat a little grilled dog, but he was living in Indonesia at the time. Right? Indonesians will occasionally have that as an entree. Sounds a little weird to all of us, I know, but the question is, why is Sean Hannity bringing that up, repeating it? Right? And Romney didn't bite, to his credit. Romney did not bite. His response to that was, I'm not going to get into that stuff. We don't have to get into these kinds of stories. Let's focus on the issues. I don't know if it bothers any of you that he would have had a taste of that at one point. Dog lovers. By the way, this was in reaction to the fact that the Democrats were making a lot of humorous jokes out of the fact that Romney once went on vacation and put his dog on the roof of the car, I think in a cage, but still tied to the roof of the car. That thing's been running on and on. So this was sort of a response from the other camp. Well, yeah, and there was a bunch of little jokes made on the side that something along the lines of, from the opponent's camp, well, you know, Obama would never tie a dog to the car because it dries out the meat. That was an actual tweet that went out at one point. Obama had to release his birth certificate. No president, I don't believe, has ever had to do that publicly. Oop. I'm not going to show you the clip here, but the White House had to do this. And he had made a little speech. There it is. The fact that he was forced to release his birth certificate, his legitimate birth certificate from Hawaii, suggests how he is being otherized, that he had to do that. There were these questions that were being spread about him. Now, for the Romney side of things, I want to turn your attention to the really marvelous, whoops, that's not it. The marvelous LibGuide that your history department has put together for you. You got to go here. Some essential questions that I think are relevant. Who's that handsome guy? Some interesting video clips. This one I'm not going to, how are we doing for time? We're okay? How much time do we have? 13 or so? Okay. This one, a super PAC with millions of dollars and a huge rich financier put out a 300-page report that essentially was saying that, kept referring to Obama as the, and maybe some of you have seen this, the metrosexual black Abraham Lincoln. I don't even know how that's relevant to anything. It's comedy. But there's some really interesting articles here, and I'm going to draw your attention to this one on Obama and Romney having comment on race and religion. You may or may not know that Romney is a Mormon, all right? And the Mormons will tell you that they are like Christians. They understand Jesus. He was an important figure, an important part of their religion. But a lot of people are still uneasy about how Mormonism relates to Christianity, and it's viewed often as a cult. And he had to go over to Liberty University, Jerry Falwell's university, and he had to tell the people at this university, this is all again in the LibGuide articles, that he believes that marriage is between one woman and one man, because there was a lot of sentiment out there based on the history of the Mormons that they've since renounced, that a man can have many wives, plural marriage. So he actually had to go out and explain to some potential backers. Let's see if this is going to play.
Culture, what you believe, what you value, how you live, matters. Now, as fundamental as these principles are, they may become topics of democratic debate from time to time. So it is today with the enduring institution of marriage. Marriage is a relationship between one man and one woman.
Kind of like, what does that remind you of that I've already been over? That he had to make a speech. JFK. He had to get out there and do what JFK did. JFK said, I'm not taking orders from the Pope. So did Al Smith in 1928. Romney had to get out there in front of potential voters and say, I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. The Mormon Church got rid of plural marriage back when? How long ago? 1800s? Somewhere in there. Back when they got out to Utah and the United States Army was about to come and wipe them out, they cut a deal. Brigham Young said to the president, who was, I don't know who the president was at the time, but the president was sending the army out there to wipe out this polygamous cult. And Brigham Young said, okay, no more plural marriage. Don't send the army. And the Mormons were allowed to live peacefully out in Utah. After being pushed out there, by the way, by lynch mobs and hordes. Their original leader was killed by a lynch mob. They got pushed out farther and farther. But in this article, also on the LibGuide, similarly, you'll see a piece here where the Montana governor, Brian Schweitzer, a Democrat, recently questioned whether female voters could back Romney because his father was born on a polygamy commune in Mexico. Again, the smears. They're not like us. These guys marry multiple women. They marry women who are underage. Now, there are fundamentalist little sects that are not part of the mainstream Church of Latter-day Saints, which is the other name for the Mormons, that practice some of these plural marriage scenarios. But the main church, the majority of Mormons, the vast majority, the ones who are like above ground, do not. But this is a Montana governor. That's not some fringe guy slandering. The other really nice thing about this town meeting LibGuide area is some of the stats. And this is what I really want to get to, what will form the basis, I think, of what writing you will do after this lecture. People are comfortable with Romney's Mormonism. It's reaching the main stage now, the fact that he is not a Christian exactly, or at all. What percent of people in July 2000, what does this tell you about people's comfort with his rule? What does the statistics say to any of you? Yes, Christina?
The support for it is getting lower.
You think the support is getting lower? I think it's getting a little better over time, the longer he's out there, but it's not absolute. People are admitting that they're uncomfortable with the guy because he's Mormon. July 2012. Some people don't even know what he is. The comfort level of those who know he's Mormon is 60%. You're going to want to take a look at this matter. Some people say it doesn't matter at all. Uncomfortable level, 22%, you know, close to 20% of voters are uncomfortable with his religion. Obama. Okay. In America, recently, 49% of people think that Barack Obama is Christian. 17% of Americans think that Barack Obama is a Muslim. This is July 2012. 3% think he's not neither. 31% don't know at all. Of the people who know he's Christian, 82% are comfortable with his faith. Of the people who say he's Muslim, only 26% of the people say they're comfortable with his faith. What does that tell you about the voting public? They're Christian. Is that what you said, Sammy? Yeah. Or they're comfortable with Christianity in their president. What percentage of people say he's Muslim? I mean, the fact is that he's Christian, but I think the other issue here is, should it matter? The other sort of pressing issue, should it matter whether he's Muslim or not? How much should we let that make us afraid? All right. It apparently is unnerving to the American voter that he would not be Christian, at least to some degree, as you can see in the statistics. But the fear and the anxiety of the other, which the Xmen tapped into so beautifully, so accurately, is trenchant. Now again, in the Xmen, they're telling you that the other is not so other as you may think. They saved the world. Oh, sorry, Nick, I thought you had your hand up. A few more statistics on the Lib Guide. How various groups view the religiousness of the president as important. America is a pretty religious place. I don't know. Do you guys think, how important is religion in the election of a president? Either your personal opinion, or what do you think just in general? How is it important that the president has a religion? Yeah, go ahead.
I think what's more important is that they can separate religion from what they practice.
Okay.
Because you don't want the direct ideals and beliefs of a religion to then be the beliefs of your country. You want what's best for the country, not what's best for what you think.
We don't want the Pope running America.
Exactly.
Even though he may be a great guy and have a perfect view on religion, but that's a different matter. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it matters, but to a certain extent, because I feel like religion can influence their personal life, but keeping it separate from politics is really important.
Right, so people with religious backgrounds do have a certain kind of important value structure that makes them good in the office, but as long as they separate some of the tenets of the religion, they need to be able to do that. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Religion gives you a nice moral structure to fall back on. So if a president doesn't have, a religion, I don't think an atheist president can ever be elected, because a lot of people would see that as a person without a moral statement.
Right. Yeah, we'd have trouble in 2012 electing an atheist president. Oh, can I show one last thing, Curry? I have one last little clip to show you. But Curry?
Has there ever been a president that sort of mixed their religion within their practices?
That's a really good question for your history teacher. My feeling about it is that they've done it on various levels. I remember George Bush practicing a kind of compassionate conservatism, which involved giving money. He implored people to give money to the church, but not a particular church. Last thing I know is, this is very quick video. Obama attended a correspondence dinner, which is a dinner every year where all the journalists show up, and it's a bit of a roast. One person gets up and roasts the journalists, roasts the president, then the president gets a chance. Here he is responding to the people that said he was born. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. No.
Aaron, I'll do with 1800.
Skip the ad. Skip the ad.
Oh, that moves so wait. What? It's a little soft. No, it isn't. Discount? Double check. Matthews? What's up, dude? Get a discount double check today.
As you're packing.
Tonight, for the first time, I am releasing my official birth video.
Donald Trump, famous person who said that he wasn't born in the United States.
I warned you. No one has seen this footage in 50 years. Not even me. But let's take a look.
Okay.
Oh well.
Just 10 seconds.
Back to square one.
Well, 30 seconds, I guess.
I want to make clear to the Fox News table, that was a joke.
Okay. All right, so there you see a great example of how to counter the otherizer smear. How do you counter it? Well, you make a joke out of it, you make light of it. Thank you.